Well, here we are again for the concluding part of our waist-deep trudge through the swamp of Hogwarts Legacy's dysfunctional social discourse, where we get to analyse how a bunch of fringe militant trans activists somehow appointed themselves as the moral guardians of the video game space. I mean, how the fuck did that happen? I guess that's a result of years of infiltrating the gaming industry and mainstream gaming journalism, ignoring neo-Marxist grooming sites like Reset Era, and a fundamental inability to call in the Rhino Tranquilizer team when targets of opportunity presented themselves. But whatever the cause, we have to deal with the consequences. At least now most of the bullshit uproar and political outrage stuff is out of the way, we can focus on the serious business at hand. Being a child wizard. So let's talk about general wizardly game mechanics, discuss why this game is so good, and maybe do a sweepstake where people have to guess what gender my player character is. And anyone that gets it wrong gets a hate crime conviction and 6 months of community service for misgendering my character, you transphobic pigs. The general game mechanics are best described as recognisable, well organised, systematic and extensive. It's all done very well and works well together, but nobody is going to have to learn anything new in order to master this game. I guess you could say it's really inclusive. It has a typical coloured tier loot system. Epic gear has a gold icon, rare is purple, uncommon is green, etc, etc. It's basically like many video games, with the same stat spread you would imagine. There are some unique items, but stats and most loot seems to be level scaled, randomised and shit from the sky. It's pretty standard stuff, done rather nicely. Talents. You have them. They generally allow variability in play, although without spoiling anything, there is already one or two metas that are hard to resist. There is one build which pretty much lets you insta-jib people. Naturally, I'm working on that one myself. It genuinely is worth putting some points into stealth because the mechanics not only work well, but can stop you relentlessly arse-pulling. Similarly, shortening cooldowns on certain things is awesome. Or maybe you want to spec more into crowd control or raw DPS. You know the drill. This is standard stuff. My only gripe with the spellcasting is that you have to spend talent points to unlock spellcast bars. Otherwise you can only have 4 equipped at one time, and if you want to cast something that isn't on your cast bar, you have to manually go in and reassign it. Personally, I thought this was strange. This is frankly a user interface issue, not a game mechanics issue. This particular perk set clunked like dropping a bag of spanners on the floor. Perks are for game stuff. Perks are not for UI stuff. It's like investing perk points into increasing your save slots, or to increase your frame rate. It just didn't make any sense. The game has crafting. There are a variety of potions and consumables for you to brew up at stations. You run around in your little grey polyester school uniform, gathering up wizarding shit, then mash it up to make useful stuff to either drink yourself or throw at the bad people. Similarly, you can upgrade certain gear with enhancement slots. Although being realistic for me personally, this mostly translated as spamming health potions. The game has a fairly standard structure. You need to level up because you get more health, can put on better gear, and different activities and quests are unlocked. So it's part of the natural order of video game character progress. However, the progress and game structure is different from a lot of open world games and RPGs. You can't just head off into the woods and grind hogs for 5 hours and ding 10 levels. The XP is inextricably linked to completing precise challenges and achievements. Outside of battle arenas, there's no real XP grinding. Basically, doing shit tallies towards capping challenges, achievements, quests and discovery goals. You get XP as you progress and ultimately complete said sets of challenges. It works, and it sort of serves to channel you towards doing the things you need to do in roughly the right order and stop you from doing the stupid shit I did. Like over-leveling in the open world without bothering to unlock basic-ass low-level spells because I couldn't be fucked to show up to class and do a 3-minute quest. So yeah, It's an open world RPG and there is lots of fun to be had by heading out on your magical ball-crushing flying mop and murdering dickheads in the woods, but this mostly gets you loot. The big money XP is in the formal activities and structured mileposts. The standard version of the game clocks in at 50 quid here in the UK. The digital deluxe edition comes in at 60 quid and includes some pixel guff like a griffin mount, some children's clothes, and an in-game dark arts arena. And contrary to what people have been saying, it does not come with a free women-only sign for the ladies' toilets. Overall, it's a job well done. The worst thing I can gripe about is the sucky spell bar perk talents. And that's about it. Mission accomplished. The combat is relatively satisfying. It's a rock, paper, scissors, looter, shooter based combat system that should not be unfamiliar to anyone. You have your little wand pistol, you have a range of spells, enemies have a range of vulnerabilities and immunities. Some of your spells are damage based, some are skills, some are crowd control. Different mob types have general strengths, weaknesses and spell vulnerabilities. For example, certain mobs are extremely weak to fire. Similarly, some mobs are easy to deal with if you CC them during their big attack. Obviously, the more you learn to identify the mobs and to deal with their shit, the easier it all becomes, and similarly, the better gear you have, the better it all goes. And if all else fails, just do what I did in Elden Ring. Just constantly roll around like an arsehat. There are some additional gadgets, potions and deployables that either help you or hurt the enemy. This is all fairly standard fare. As someone who is fairly light on skill and doesn't like learning stuff, I found focusing on gear and getting a few working combos, basically a CC followed by a big DPS burst, all worked well, especially when I was kiting around, head glitching and generally being a snide skillless fuck. The awkward part of the combat was the shit port console control setup. If these guys went into the horse and cart business, the jalopy would come with a console controller and not reins. It's hard to deal with this weird total console control system with a mouse and keyboard. You have your little slots, you switch between them and you rejig the spells into each slot based on how you want setups to be organised. How this works on the ground is this. You switch things around and suddenly muscle memory is making you spam the wrong button for hours until you move them again, and you have to move them again at some point because at the start of the game you only have one spell bar with 4 spell slots. Christ, you have to move spells if you just want to cast Reparo or Cornholio. It's a fucking computer. They could have included better button mapping instead of hard porting console based menu combat systems. Talents make a huge difference, and I mean huge. I'd been goofing around questing while sitting on a ton of talent points because I was having talent point commitment phobia and because I was waiting to unlock dark arts skills so I could spend the talents on that. Plus, you currently cannot respec in game, which is a bit of a fail if you ask me. Holding back talent points was a big mistake on 2 fronts, because 1, the dark arts only fully unlock practically at the end of the game, and 2, you only need to hold 10 points back to secure the lot, so I really should have been spending everything over 10. Anyway, I got to a trial fighting these massive guardian mongs and they were kicking my arse. I think they were those cheating guardians that take hormones for 3 months and then take part in the wrong category. Anyway, I was struggling to clear the trash before the boss, let alone the boss. I watched a guide and that helped a bit, but I was just effectively stuck. I bit the bullet and invested in talent points. Just 3 points. 1 gave me improved dodge, big mistake. The other 2 reduced my cast time and increased the rate that I charged up ancient magic. I did this and then one-shotted the trial. The moral of the story is 1. Talent points are critically important, and 2. Don't shit your pants. Seriously, if you take one bit of usable information away from this video, it is this. Don't shit your pants in combat. It is really easy to flail around, sprinting and dodge rolling and generally panicking. You will lose your situational awareness faster than a division community manager getting ganked in the DZ, and most likely end up DPSing down all the targets a little bit, rather than focusing fire and burning down one at a time. So do a better job of keeping your nerve than me. Try and stay focused, try and face down your targets and hit your shield or dodge when the attacks happen and burn them down. Because trust me, running around like a headless chicken, constantly retargeting different mobs, and constantly having swords stuck up your lady vajayjay is no way to carry on. Take it from an expert, headless chicken. I tried that tactic a lot, and it failed. And don't forget that this advice stands for male players too, because apparently even men can have lady vajayjays these days. This is very much a painful console port on PC, however it confers one excellent advantage. It autosaves really well. One infuriating thing about some PC games, and many bad ports, is the utterly fuckless save mechanics. Whilst I still occasionally manually save out of hard-earned paranoia, the game autosaves regularly and with critically appropriate timing. It's not like some games where you forget to manually save, die, and end up back in 2022 with no clue where you are, what you did, and where to go next. And it's clearly better than Atomic Heart, which let me play for 5 fucking hours, and due to a known bug, didn't save at all, meaning that now I'm right back at the intro scene. That's unforgivable. Hogwarts Legacy tends to just set you down just right before where you died with little or no progress lost. The reason I make a big deal about this is because it is great for immersion. A lot of the sort of people playing this game are most likely sitting at their desks in Harry Potter cosplay outfits. They sweep their house with a literal medieval straw broom, and as recent studies showed, 37% of the players own an actual physical wand. Okay, I made that last bit up, but I'm merely making the point that many Potterites players won't want to be fucking around in the settings screen every 10 minutes, manually saving and bursting their Harry Potter immersion bubble. Functionality and fuckery. There is no romance option in this game. I can honestly say that does not disappoint me. I frankly wasn't looking forward to the prospect of being chased around Hogwarts School by an army of horny 15-year-old boys all desperate to try and finger me. Unless it was a minigame with excellent rewards. Free loot is free loot, am I right? Overall, Hogwarts Legacy is a shockingly fuckery-free affair. It comes with no microtransactions or monetization, apart from a digital deluxe upgrade. Not ideal, not preferable, and all content should really be in the base game, but I'm not going to throw a paddy over a fucking cloak, a mount, and one activity when none of it affects gameplay, and these items are a speck of dust compared to the avalanche of gear and cosmetics you get in game. It launched finished, which was frankly a novelty in this era of broken ass games routinely being feebly pushed onto shelves. I'm running this game on a shitburger PC with an average graphics card, and it's entirely playable from launch. That is vastly superior to games such as The Last of Us 1 on PC, which literally does not fucking work. And then Gamerant had the audacity to accuse the players of, quote, review bombing it. No, it's just getting shit reviews on Steam, because it's a shit port. In fact, the performance of Hogwarts Legacy was quietly surprising given the antiquated nature of the PC I was using. I wouldn't go as far as to say my PC qualifies as actual steampunk, but it's certainly an ancient Heath Robinson affair. Occasional puffs of smoke jet out the sides and back, and it regularly makes hissing and clanking noises. But by dialing back the settings a bit, turning off some of the high-end graphical options and capping the frame rate at 60 FPS, it ran just fine. Seriously. The only particularly noticeable issues with running it on an arse-crumble PC was the long load times when I fast travelled, the occasional hang frame, and the door loading screens. It's entirely possible on a high-end rig you don't even notice this, but lots of doors in Hogwarts are actually stealth loading screens. But I could see them because my PC has less RAM than a ZX81, so I got my obligatory little hourglass wheel. Still, overall, I would say that most people could make this game playable on any rig if they were prepared to sacrifice some graphics options. The fact that it runs at all, let alone fairly well on my shitbox rig, is testimony to its optimisation. I guess we need to talk about gender, or lack thereof. But let's be honest, like most video games these days, they took the knee and dodged the whole gender issue. Because a militant fraction of 1% of a section of society, that is less than a fraction of said fraction of 1%, is threatening to throw bricks through the studio's windows if they so much as see the words man or womb man in a fucking video game. Maybe soon militant vegans can ban meat from all video games, or perhaps militant furries will demand that furries are represented in all video games. Who knows? At this point we can't rule anything out. You get to choose between male-ish and female-ish looking avatars, and I think the gender assignment comes when you have to pick whether you are a wizard or a nice wizard lady. I did read one interesting article in the Conversation where they discussed the gender identity politics in game and how the game still represents a metaphorical kind of identity essentialism. After reading this, I arrived at 3 conclusions about modern academic discourse surrounding gender identity and social constructionism. 1. Some dickheads have far too much free time on their hands. 2. It doesn't matter what concessions you make to appease these crazy fucks. Nothing will ever be enough, and even if you do enough, they will claim you did it in the wrong way. And 3. It's a real shame that the internet age resulted in all these kinds of magazines no longer printing their articles on actual physical paper, because had this not happened, these days I would no longer be wasting money on toilet paper. I would just keep a giant stack of progressive magazines like this next to the shitter. It would be a great Freudian therapy for me personally. Juvenile? Yes. Therapeutic? Absolutely. Now, statistics might vary, but to put this all in perspective, here in the UK about 0.2% of people identify as some form of non-binary or trans. So if video games are transforming themselves in order to simp at the altar of identity politics, those are pretty big concessions for what is essentially a nominal group. A bit harsh? Well, 3.3% of the UK population own firearms. So how about we shit-can the identity politics and focus a bit more on quality gunplay and representing firearms more authentically in video games? Fuck me, in one previous census, 0.8% of people declared their religion as Jedi. That means there are approximately 4 times the number of Jedis than trans people. But I don't see anyone passing laws to allow people to self-identify as Padawans and get special legal protection from online harassment. I am not trying to diminish the troubles and tribulations that trans people have to endure. I am merely noting that if we are going to base representation on prevalence rather than vocal outrage, then frankly we should stop trying to make every single video game conform to trans activist demands and focus on something more statistically relevant, like opening more gun stores, or, given the number of Jedis steadily rising in the UK, making sure all our signs are bilingual like in Canada. English and Yoda-ish. I managed to faceplant into the character creation screen and create some kind of semi-passable attempt at a non-binary, gender-dysphoric, magical, titless non-lady. So if I can manage that without any experience or training of either being sexually confused or being a wizard, then clearly this game has done its best not to trigger the wokerati. Following from this, there's also another issue that requires similarly sensitive analysis. In Hogwarts Legacy, you can't be a greasy fat fuck. I like being a fat bastard. It's how I self-identify, and I feel strongly that I should be sufficiently represented in video games. Between massive pie-eating sessions. I felt slightly robbed by not being able to create a giant, waddling pie beast that adequately represented my sexual identity. You basically choose from a selection of characters that look like Harry Potter actors. Well, Harry Potter actors in their prime, not like they look now. Did they constrain the character creation options to stop arseholes from designing giant, fat, blue-haired SJW pig scarers in order to troll permanently offended online activists? Of course they did. They clearly appreciated this was precisely what a bunch of us were planning to do. Where is the body positivity movement when you need them? They should jump on this issue like a tramp on chips. Just like they jump on chips. And start campaigning on Twitter to have fat representation in video games. Now that's a cause I can get behind. I got to admit there were certain aspects of the port that grated. Mainly because it really is a no fucks given lazy port. It's one of those games where if you rebind anything, the game screams warnings at you about the 7 other things that are now unbound because you arrogantly assumed that just because they let you rebind keys, they honestly didn't think anyone would be rude enough to actually do it. Clearly this is a game where they spent many thousands of hours trying to overlap and systematise hundreds of different controls from several different modes like on foot, flying, riding, etc. and make them all seamlessly condense into an overlapping system that will function well on a console controller in what can only be considered a feat of ergonomic synergy. But then an Oberleutnant from the PC Master Race walked into the studio and said, "You guys are going to optimise this for PC too, yeah?" And the guy in charge of UI, integration and porting held out his hand and said, "Pull my finger." When the finger was pulled, he sharted himself. They all giggled and then fucked off down the pub, whilst the intern stayed behind to copy and paste the key bindings into the PC build. Describing this port as a low effort does not do it justice. This is Jeffrey Epstein fake suicide levels of barely being bothered to cover up what a shit job you did. It's Elden Ring levels of not bothered. I'm talking when the game starts, it says hit any key. None of the keys work because you have to actually click the mouse. That level of unfucked and caring not one shit is taking the piss. Press any key. Practically your first interactions with the game is wrong. It was considered acceptable to leave it wrong. Now it's a real shame that the game lets itself down like this and it is pointlessly wasted credibility, but the main functional impact of the bad port is how it affects spellcasting. Imagine the spell bar system of World of Warcraft. Now imagine the following. Instead of 10 spells per bar, you only have 4. You can't hotkey any of the spells individually. You can only have one of these 4 spell bars selected on the screen at any one time. You can only use buttons 1 to 4 for the 4 spells on the bar on the screen. If you want to use a different spell bar, you have to scroll to it. It literally makes your PC monitor manual contrast control system look like slick, groundbreaking ergonomics. In the light of some recent very high profile shit ports, I think publishers are soon going to be forced to do better on ports. It's not hard, it's not much money. We're talking less than they would pay to bribe 1 or 2 YouTubers. Do better. There's also the issue of the online scandal about paid reviews and all the associated accusations. Many activists have been crying foul on the positive reviews of Hogwarts Legacy and claiming that review sites were paid off to say nice things. Well, for once, me and the alphabet people are on the same page, in a way. And it's actually heartening that they are waking up to the reality that the mainstream review industry is an industry. Money changes hands, there might be limits, and there might be rules of engagement, but ultimately the only colour they are interested in is green. Of course reviews are bought and paid for all the time. The money might go to the advertising department, then the orders go from the editor to the reviewer, but the money trail leaves the publisher, travels through the publication and ends up materialising in the reviews. Put it this way, do you honestly think that some peon reviewer on minimum wage at IGN gets handed a copy of any major TripleA video game and just gets told, "Give me your honest opinion and we'll publish it, even if you give it 1 out of 10. Of course that's not how this all works, because that is why you have editors. The editor makes sure the published articles align with the best interests of the shareholders and owners. Therefore, Writers either naturally align with the general consensus at the publication, or their articles get pushed back for a rewrite by the editor. This is all about compliance, voluntary or mandatory. To be fair, the review cycle is a video in its own right. There were some hilarious reviews that read like Chinese state propaganda pieces, where the game ultimately got a great score, but the reviewer spent most of the time banging on about J.K. Rowling being a fascist and the game represents literal violence against trans people. But the big takeaway here is this: mainstream video game reviews are bought and paid for all the damn time, and I'm sure Hogwarts is no exception. However, on this occasion, the game happens to be pretty good. Therefore, since this is consistent with reviews, I think the notion that it's only getting good reviews because of bribes is false. It's a pretty damn good game. It got pretty damn good reviews, generally. Move along. There's nothing to see here. I guess we should talk about the game's options. It has buttons, and I pressed lots of them to see if I could make something break. They worked. I think it's safe to say that if it's in the game, there is probably a setting for it that you can adjust. The Nvidia settings are a bit balked. I mean, after installing the game it ran okay-ish given my system, then I had a pop at letting Nvidia GeForce Experience optimise it for performance, and that shit went crazy. It turned some random things way down, then turned other high drain shit right up. It basically chose troll settings that tank performance, and I had to go in manually and search out all the random shit it had set to ultra and turn it to medium or high. It's a bit better now, and I'm sure with patch iterations it will do better. I'm also sure people will berate me for being a lazy arse and letting Nvidia optimise my game automatically, and they would probably be correct in doing so. But the important thing is that pretty much if it's in the game, there's probably a setting for it and you can change it. The hypocrisy surrounding the game is legion. This is a topic picked up on by many content creators because, well, gaming YouTubers are actually better than mainstream journalism now. But the hypocrisy surrounding this game is utterly rampant. We have mainstream outlets bitching and whining about how they don't support this game because Hogwarts Legacy literally goes out beating up trans people every night after pub kick-out time, and J.K. Rowling murders people in her basement. I'm sorry, but anyone who claims there is any link between the nice wizard lady and any actual harm to anyone has been getting high on their own ideological supply. It's more hyperbolic than the shit that I come out with. I did do my best to search through the police records, but I could not find one instance of anyone ending up in hospital claiming that J.K. Rowling's comments made someone beat them up. Similarly, I could find no records of any gangs of Harry Potter cosplayers stalking around towns, beating up the LGBTQ+ community. So if in your internet travels you hear someone claim that J.K. Rowling, or supporting Hogwarts Legacy, is literally responsible for literal violence against the literal trans community, you're either dealing with an idiot or someone who uses the word literally too often. The voice pitch settings are ridiculous. Because it's there you automatically choose it, and it doesn't work. It's like a voice distorter. You know those devices you use when you phone someone up from a burner phone so you can make weird sex noises? It's exactly like that. It's like an in-game option to make you sound like you're trying to talk on helium. I guess they needed to add voice pitch control to appease the alphabet people, and I sneakingly had a snigger that they couldn't even be bothered to do it properly. The voice pitch control is so bad, I honestly suspect that someone is either doing a dirty protest or making some kind of point. It's like the manager instructed them to include a pitch bend feature as a matter of principle, but also told them to spend no more than 10 minutes doing it. Whatever happened, it certainly sounds like they were taking the piss, and I absolutely love it. The burglary. As a friend rightly pointed out to me, some of the environmental looting is a little bit, like actual looting. You casually walk into people's offices and homes, shoulder bump them out of the way, and then help yourself to all their stuff. It's a tiny bit odd. Almost as odd as the random bags of money that someone is leaving around, in plain sight, on wooden boxes and by buildings. Perhaps all possession is theft here, so I will continue to help myself. I don't think it's particularly outrageous or controversial to say that they probably should have thought a bit harder about how to contextualise the environmental loot. Sure, it's an openish, worldish, looterish, shooterish video game, so it needs random crap littering the landscape for you to snaffle up in order to get your dopamine fix. I'm merely noting that they might have given this a little thought, because even in my school, which was a shithole, the teachers would have been very upset if I just marched into their office and started pilfering all their shit from their desk right in front of them, so I don't think this shit would fly at a posh wizard school. Sadly, the game has a fairly critical loot bug. In Hogwarts Legacy, you have a tiny inventory. Originally, I had 20 slots, 7 of which are taken up by the gear I'm actually wearing, which means I can carry a grand total of 13 loot items. If you loot a legendary item when your bag is full, it is lost forever. Permanently. It's permanently lost for that playthrough. That's a bit shit. They might want to consider fixing that. The Broom controls sadly also suck balls. Instead of some kind of system where it moves intuitively towards where you're pointing, you literally have to WASD that shit with the keyboard whilst mouse looking. Dear Lord, talk about sucking the joy out of an activity. I hope this gets some kind of a patch and introduces different flight controls. In fact, given the central nature and primacy of broom flight in a Harry Potter game, I'm surprised it didn't get its own dedicated control section in the options. Imagine trying to fly a helicopter and instead of the normal controls, they just gave you 10 levers like you'd get in an old-fashioned rail junction control tower. I might be a fucking mutant, but even I don't have 6 fingers on each hand. This means that I can't steer, descend and fly at top speed at the same time. I guess I'll just have to work around it for now because I don't have any choice. Besides, I'm tired of running my little trainer bra tits off through 16 levels, so I'll take the Broom over Shanks's pony any day. That said, how the fuck do people sit on these things without experiencing shocking pain? Imagine your entire body weight being suspended by a broomstick pulled up between your legs. That sounds like the world's slowest and most protracted kick in the balls. Or vagina, I'm not genitalist. Maybe some people like having their balls crushed. Actually, I know factually that some men do like to have their balls crushed, as a kink. I can only assume that some ladies with balls might enjoy it too. So what is my overall take on Hogwarts Legacy, the video game? Despite being couched in magical wizard lady terminology, some of the basic underlying game mechanics are very familiar stuff. Revelio is basically pulse or proximity scan. Think Division. The grabby spell is basically a remote grab. Think Dishonored. Lumos is basically your flashlight. Think Fallout. Your wand is essentially a stock pistol. Think nearly every other game you've played. So whilst it's all covered in the glitter of Hogwarts, the underlying mechanics are very comprehensible. What's more, they mostly seem to have direct utility and create an obviously deliberate flow in the game. You run around, spamming your reveal spell, trying to identify any point of interest in close proximity, and then use what spells are required to solve the puzzle, or kill the baddies, and win your loots. This all strings together with the quest structure, so you are travelling from point to point, capping quests while spamming your pulse en route, trying to find, cap, unlock or interact with everything you discover on the way. It's a busy game with lots to do, and you're rewarded for exploring. So at times, especially in Hogwarts School itself, it can become a bit pulse spammy as you're trying to locate the knowledge books, and given the spatial audio feedback you get, think sonar, if you're only playing on stereo, it can get a little frustrating trying to locate the shit that you need to complete a challenge. But it wasn't too annoying. They clearly tried to avoid the classic World of Warcraft concept of go here and kill 10 pigs, where the primary goal is to provide the illusion of activity when what you're really doing is grinding. Putting lipstick on an Elwyn Forest pig, if you will. In Hogwarts, your XP, loots and general advancement seems much more closely bound to doing discrete quests, challenges and exploration chores to unlock specific stuff when you cap the associated activity stuff. It is very much more quest driven than grinding based. Serious work and planning went into this. Any fan of the vanilla division will feel right at home on so many levels, apart from possibly being dressed in children's clothes and being constantly chased around by 15-year-old boys who want to finger you. Obviously. Or girls. I'm not sexist. Or trans kids. I'm not transphobic. Obviously the division was always basically a World of Warcraft analogue, reskinned to look like a shooter, even though under the hood you were essentially casting spells. Well, in a strange and dare I say positive way, Hogwarts Legacy is basically a bit of a looter shooter under the hood. It's a lot better crafted, much more pretty, and it's a lot better organised, but I definitely got the looter shooterish vibe once I hit the open world. Talking about organised, it's very well structured and tightly organised early game. In fact, early game you feel like it's entirely quest driven, and you kind of forget that there is a massive open world outside of the cumsock stench of the Hogwarts dormitories. It clearly has an almost school-like curriculum, unironically, where it strings your activities together to guide you through your early induction into the school of wand thrusting and all of the requisite skills, utilities and abilities that you need to know exist. That doesn't mean you can't just fuck it and check out what's down the road fairly early on, but the problem that I immediately encountered at level 11 or 12 was that once I hit the open road, I didn't have certainly one spell learned yet which pretty much locks you out of certain activities. There was a clue there. So after testing my mettle against a bunch of random enemy animals and some cabbage smugglers, I decided to stop being a dosser and dutifully head back to my classes. This is not some thrown together open world looter shooter wander around shit. It's actually quite impressive how much of this gear and progression nonsense is very well structured, planned, coordinated and worked out long in advance to be an organised progression. It must have been an exercise in planning and logistics to work all this shit out in advance, because certainly early game everything you discover and work through is a tailored pre-planned progression through unlocks. The game abounds with content. Seriously, the breadth and depth of content, activities, quests and collectible gonks certainly seems as expansive as other top tier open world games. If you want to test this theory, then play for 50 hours, then go onto YouTube and watch a tips and tricks video, and I absolutely guarantee you that it will show you stuff in game that you have either not discovered yet or raced right past. In fact, you should probably read yourself a spoiler warning before doing that. You're a grown up, you can make grown up choices. The audio in game is excellent, the music makes an impression but it's not intrusive. The special effects seem fine, but I don't really have a wizardry benchmark with which to make a comparison. If you want me to judge the sound of a rifle action being cycled, I'm all in. I'm practically a world authority on the acoustics of Molotov cocktails hitting a hard surface with the imploding wet smash of glass, followed by the whoomph of the partially dispersed petrol igniting in the air like a poor man's fuel air explosion. Sorry, I got a bit carried away there. Lots of fond memories came flooding back. My point is that I don't know what magic sounds like, but it probably sounds a bit like this game. Maybe? Fuck knows. It doesn't sound like lasers, so it was good enough for me. The soundtrack has been released as 2 albums by Warner Brothers. No surprise there. There are 75 tracks featuring the music of composers such as J. Scott Rakoczy, Peter Murray, and Michael Bolton's estranged cousin, Chuck E. Myers. I don't really know much about any of these guys, but Chuck E. Myers' CV reads like a shopping list of driving games and interactive dancing titles. The RPG speech options are a tiny bit lol at times. I'll be careful what I say here because this is mainly based on research and not experience. There are some things you only discover on your 4th playthrough or months later when watching YouTube guides. But I will hesitantly say this. Most of the dialogue options seem largely unimpactful. Read, meaningless. But a few of them are utterly outcome critical. Many of them are a mere formality. Certainly from what I saw, it's a bit like Fallout 4 quest negotiation. The biggest outcome is that you can screw extra rewards out of people by being a bitch. Well, I would note that at least in Fallout 4 you can piss people off and they won't deal with you. In Hogwarts, it's mostly fluff and flavour, with rare encounters where it can really matter. So why is this game so well designed, and why has it been a very decent example of a universally well-liked video game? Well, it's got its whole little busy bee setup so nicely fleshed out. Some games like Arse Creed Valhalla have a tendency of giving you shit to do for the sake of making you do shit. In the era of live service games and publishers peddling player engagement as a metric of share value, many open world games bend over backwards to stuff the game with as many pointless activities, time sinks and superfluous chores as they possibly can, just to create the largest possible gap between the player and any desired outcome. They are just shoveling shit jobs at you for the sake of keeping you online and exposing you to targeted sales for as long as humanly possible. Like a resentful boss who's giving you pointless jobs to do just because he hates the thought of you finishing all your work and sitting there playing Minesweeper. At the other extreme you have games like Fallout 3 where you head off in one direction to do something and then end up getting sidetracked, investigating, checking around the next corner, finding something, and then the next thing you know your 10-minute mission has turned into a 3-hour gaming session and you're going to have to come back the next day to do the thing you originally set out to do. Hogwarts Legacy is kinda like the latter, and it balances this all just right. The world is large, but it's quite dense with activities, and they frequently overlap. I heard Luke Stevens discussing the 15-second rule, and that makes sense too. It's the concept that if you're travelling around, a good open world tends to have something to interact with every 15 seconds or so, else it feels like you're running around empty space. I don't know the science, but I will say this. A compliment I can give Hogwarts Legacy is that if I jump on my phallocentric Broom speeder bike, I frequently find myself having to resist sidetracking. I have to force myself to ignore stuff I'm flying past in order to get to my goal and complete it. And this layering of quests, activities, challenges and exploration is clearly deliberate and well thought through. It's like a video game fatty burgling a sweet shop in the middle of the night. You just don't know which jar to stick your sweaty mitt into first. The diversity and inclusion naturally requires discussion. Personally, I did not find the diversity and inclusivity of the game, or the first 3 films, particularly grating or offensive. I don't know what the general reception was, but my take was that it made sense. If there hypothetically was a wizard fraternity, and I mean a real one, not like Red Storm Studios, I would assume that the wizardry of the world would have more in common with each other than any of them would have with their local populace or their national or ethnic identity. It would therefore make absolute sense that they would form an international fraternity that would transcend local nationality. The exact same process occurs in other educational establishments. That's why university departments hire their researchers and professors from all over the world. If you're running a volcanology department in Plymouth, you want the best people on the planet to do research there, wherever they come from. With a few notable exceptions, nobody cares about race, nationality or ethnicity in academia. The few notable exceptions obviously being any researchers from communist China working in Western universities are probably there to spy or steal your intellectual property, and the other exception being universities in Portland, which basically don't like whitey. They're all oppressors apparently. Who'd have thought it? Best not to hire white professors. The obvious massive exception to all of this natural and logical ethnic diversity is the clunkingly awkward inclusion of the trans barkeeper, which lands like a giant thud in the middle of the early game.
Sirona, please.
And is shoehorned in with the tact and nuance of a fucking landmine. If you ever wanted an example of a trans character mashed into a role as an afterthought to try and cynically appease the woke mob, well, here you go. It's like someone in the marketing department burst into a developers meeting a few months before launch and shouted, "Quick, grab a tranny and stick her in the game somewhere near the start so all the reviewers will see her. He, they, it, Z, whatever. Just make sure it's early game so you can't avoid running into her. Doesn't matter what they're doing. Stick her in the fucking pub or something. Who gives a shit? Just make sure everyone sees her." This was less subtle than getting a Sharpie pen and writing, "I like coloured folk" on your forehead, and then taking a gentle stroll through Harlem, singing Zippity Doodah. The blatant, clunky virtue signalling of a trans character to manipulate the breaking reviews was unconvincing and insincere. It was also entirely unnecessary. They could have just pointed at any female character and said, "She's trans. She used to be a geezer. Job done." But no, they had to do it this way and then virtue signal about it. I would personally posit that this kind of shit probably does more harm than good if you really want people to accept others for who they are, rather than to accept people as representations of political positions. Just saying. The character was fine, the voice acting was fine, there was nothing intrinsically bad about any of this. It was just obviously a weak effort. It was a trans character positioned deliberately early game to make a statement, a PR statement. We can see what you did there. And why are all trans characters in video games like this? Why not this? I think there's a bit of objectification going on there, combined with a distinct lack of body positivity. This game does have its flaws. You can't adjust breast size, you can't make your character gigantically fat like Trigglypuff, most of which can be somewhat overlooked or worked around. However, there is one elephant in the room that a lot of reviewers have glossed over like it's a trivial issue, and I'm talking about reviewers that I used to respect. And I'm at a loss to explain why so many people, deliberately or accidentally, opted to sidestep this glaring omission. Hogwarts Legacy has no fishing minigame. That's a fucking disgrace. All those lakes and no fishing minigame. What the fuck were they thinking? Are these guys fucking high? That, as they say, is a trick thoroughly missed. So I'm going to throw this hot potato out there and see who catches it. Now, I don't want to trivialise anyone's lived experience or personal challenges, but maybe, just maybe, the trans activist community should spend a little bit less time freaking out on Twitter about fifis and expend a bit more effort on dealing with the really important social issues by lobbying the developer to patch in a phishing minigame. Social justice isn't just a catchphrase you throw out on social media to virtue signal. If they really want to show they care about the world we live in, then get to fucking work fixing this injustice. Hogwarts needs a phishing minigame. I would even buy it as a DLC. It is worth noting that it is possible to get your quests a bit out of order. Whilst you're totally free to do what you please, there does appear to be a preferred or ideal way to advance through the game. I did this one quest, and when I got there he asked me to do some random shit with a book, which I didn't have. Now, I'm not sure if this was the plan or whether I had skipped some quest, but it certainly felt like I'd got here early, a feeling that was amplified by me unlocking my talent tree. Then it turned out I had 12 unspent talent points in a game with a max level of 40. On top of this, I kept getting quests that required spells I hadn't even trained yet because I hadn't been bothering to attend classes. Now, I later came to the conclusion that not having the book was probably intentional, but clearly my talent issues and lack of spells was me getting my quest chain knickers in a twist. So yeah, maybe I spent too much time fucking around in the woods, killing thieves and cabbage gypsies when I should have been going to class, especially since I was level 16 and I hadn't even done my level 6 flying broom quest yet. Not too much of a big deal, to be honest, because I'd been having plenty of fun turfing around on campus and throwing perverts, upskirters and flashers out of the ladies' toilets. So what do I care? But I think my point is it's probably worth trying to pay attention to where the game is trying to push you. Else you might find yourself a little bit out of sorts. Hogwarts Legacy is clearly a Harry Potter fan's wet dream, and I would imagine given the average age of Harry Potter fans, they probably already have a lot of wet dreams. Only now they can have them whilst they're awake and immersed in a Harry Potter universe. Think about it. Someone made an above average game with no fuckery, it's entirely dripping with genuine Harry Potter lore, it's steeped in the tradition and visual grandeur of the books and films, and you get to spend all day running around, spunking your wand in people's faces and doing the magics. Plus you get to fly around on a broom. Of course, die-hard Potter zealots are going to lap this shit up. And they have. Nobody wins a cookie for guessing that things get really wild once you unlock the broom. Unlocking the first vehicle in any game obviously transforms the rate at which you can explore. Being able to fly though means you can totally rage around, skipping over angry mobs and just unlock fast travel points, while spamming your pulse and soaking up the scenery. Don't do what I did and run around exploring and doing side quests early and end up mid-level before being told to go and do that 2-minute quest to get a free broom and flying skills. Yes, I ran around a lot unnecessarily. But fuck knows, I needed the exercise. The Room of Requirement is also rather slick. You eventually get given your own grandiose apartment in Hogwarts to use, and I say this quite unironically. It's a base of operations, if you will. I guess it's strangely fitting that a Harry Potter game has a base of operations, since Ubisoft combat games are all made by wizards and they all get one. It would be kind of unfair if an actual wizard game didn't get one too. It's basically a bolt hole that you can adorn with your crafting and wizarding nonsense, and you get a little elf slave. How cool is that? I've always wanted my own slave. Nice it's finally coming back into fashion, really. Subject to gathering up enough wizard juice or building fuel or whatever, you can basically fill the Room of Requirement with all kinds of furniture, decorations and functional equipment. Your first inclination is to decorate and make it look pretty, but you quickly realise that this gaff is really a factory and a science lab. All the potions, ingredients and consumables can be grown, spawned or manufactured here, if you work smart. If I was a gambling man, I would bet that the developers based this very heavily on garrisons from World of Warcraft. You basically zip back here periodically to gather resources, then set everything up again, and then go questing whilst the timers tick down. Obviously, a huge deal has to be made about the Transmog. This game vomits loot at you, and they automatically confer the transmogrification copyright deets as soon as you get it. On top of that, there is a shit ton of other visual stuff to unlock by challenges and quests and mounts you can buy from the shop. Essentially, once you got an item, you get the cosmetic design with it in your library. Basically, you know all that nice stuff that most AAA companies paywall or monetize these days, or pack into loot boxes or the in-game shop? Well, in Hogwarts, not only do you have a metric fuck ton of it, but it's all free. It's like the anti-Ubisoft. Hogwarts Legacy sets the standard on how in-game loot and cosmetics should be done. There is a ton of it, it is very artistically designed, and it's absolutely free. Obviously, when I say setting the standard, I mean doing what all games used to do until about 10 years ago. But I will take this win, since it landed in my barely pubescent lap. The success of Hogwarts Legacy basically shows us two things. Nobody gives a fuck about the boycott, and that the game is essentially good. As I said, people don't realise that 90% of people are in the middle of the extremes and they don't really care about the social media bullshit. You might have people on one side screaming "squee" and saying boycott the game because fascism, And you might have people on the other side telling them to go and fuck themselves. Me being one of them on this occasion, but most people, however, sat in the middle and said, "Oh nice, a Harry Potter game, that looks decent." And it was. And here is a critical point about it being decent. The genius behind this game's design is that it had a simple plan which they followed well. This is not fucking rocket science. There is nothing complex going on here. And metaphorically, here is how I think this all went down. There was a meeting, and someone walked in and said the following: "Make a Harry Potter game, and don't fuck it up. Stay authentic and true to the franchise, make it high quality and run well. Don't create controversy by ramming it full of microtransactions. Don't ruin it by doing a Neil Cuckman and making the protagonist a giant non-binary steroidal beast who kills Harry Potter. Just make a decent Harry Potter game. Give the players lots of that nice Harry Pottery and wizard bothering stuff to do, lots of loot, lots of cosmetics, and make it all work properly. Then stick it in a fucking box and sell it at a fair price." There is nothing complicated going on here. It's basically just what used to happen with lots of video games before about 2010. Make a good game, don't be a prick about it, make sure it runs on launch day. Everyone goes home for tea and medals. I think the whole anti-JK Rowling boycott is a classic case of the bad guys not realising they are the bad guys. These spite-filled brown shirts are attacking people with the same levels of scabrous ferocity as Mao's minions in the Cultural Revolution, based on the most spurious of bad takes or entirely fictionalised accusations that have nothing to do with reality, but derive themselves from online hate fiction. People claim JK Rowling funds anti-trans hate groups. Total lie. That she funds right-wing groups. Total lie. She's a Nazi and a fascist. Utter lie. That her words directly translate into hate crimes and violence against trans people. Yet another lie. And none of these arse clowns bother to check the receipts, try to confirm the accusations using primary sources, or seem at all bothered with actual reality or fact. You know reality, that thing you have to confront when you shut down Twitter. To use a generic example, I actually watched a video game content creator rail on JK Rowling with a level of bias, vitriol and hate I normally reserve for bad PC ports or people who ban me from servers for camping. Best way I can describe this scenario is: the creator was trans, this person by their own admission / victim crafting has a laundry list of mental health issues. Christ, there's a whole PhD right there. The person was doing a product placement for Monster Energy drink during the video, and a 3-minute Google of that corporation's background will make the eye-watering hypocrisy blindingly obvious. This person was stringing together a list of pejoratives about how hateful JK Rowling was, and repeatedly calling her a fascist every couple of sentences. And the stunningly fascist part of all of this was that the majority of this entire tirade was not trading in facts. It was slamming up slides of hit pieces that other people had written and using their insults as descriptors of JK Rowling like they were facts. This was literally someone holding up examples of people calling JK Rowling names, pointing at them and screeching, "Look, she must be a fascist, because other idiots are calling her names too." Many are claiming that this is the worst time in history to be gay or trans. This is factually a lie. It's not even a subculture if the police have your pride flags on their car, dance your dances, and the government flies flags in the streets. I'm a huge fan of alternative ways of thinking. Intellectual diversity is our strength. It's good to have opposing theories to debate with, and it's healthy as long as the crazy people don't get too many tenured positions at universities. Critical race theory, social constructionism, gender studies, these are all wonderful ingredients to have in the giant cooking pot of intellectual advancement. But just like cooking, there has to be a balance. A pinch of salt, a dust of cloves, and a few twists of ground pepper is wonderful. But nobody wants to eat a pie that is 1/4 salt, 1/4 cloves, 1/4 pepper, and the rest made up with a bit of pastry and half a pound of ground crickets. That's basically a giant salt pellet with a large serving of arse. My point is, I don't mind that there are alleged intellectuals out there peddling this crap, and engaging them is all part of healthy debate and the progress of our civil society. But to reduce it to the most basic and perhaps juvenile level, let's talk about reality. There are no deep sea diving safety officers that focus on social constructionism. There are no explosives safety officers who focus on identity politics. There are no parachute safety features that originate from critical race theory. Whenever, in the real world, you need something to reliably not implode, not explode, or not smash you into the ground at terminal velocity, suddenly nobody gives a shit about social justice or social constructionism. They care about physics, maths, science, procedure, protocol, basically reality. All this philosophy stuff is great to talk about in the pub or on social media, but there ain't no such thing as a racist hand grenade or a homophobic bullet. These progressive theories are nice and all, and if you want to talk about them with your mates, that is your lookout. But just because someone believes it does not automatically make it true. Furthermore, trying to inflict all this bullshit on video games is downright lunacy. Nobody should be co-opted, bullied or legislated into supporting political causes like this. That right there is the real fascism. And I'm glad the public ignored this boycott and ignored all this shit, and the publishers largely avoided bending the knee. There are no Harry Potter hate gangs beating up trans people, and frankly a lot of these crazy fucking boycott monkeys need to stop, take a deep breath, and when they calm down, if they can ever be calm and rational, ask themselves one simple question. Is it just possible that they might be the bad guys? Hogwarts Legacy is a damn fine game. It's also absolutely worth the money and runs really well. It also did not deserve the shit that it got from the crazies, virtue signallers and the hypocritical mainstream pseudo-journalists, and it absolutely deserves praise because it didn't bend the knee.
And I was happy to help.
Okay, maybe it did a little curtsy, but it got made and it didn't go woke. So even though it's not the best game in the world, I'm going to show the same lack of integrity as mainstream video game journalists and give it 14 out of 10 and declare that it's the best game ever made in the history of humanity. Bias cuts both ways, bitches. It's probably the most significant advancement of humanity since penicillin, space travel and those little holes in ring pools that let you pin your straw in position. And everyone should own at least one copy. We have had to cover a lot of dark and sinister subjects whilst covering this fine game, and I had to make some fairly judgmental, dare I say scathing comments about a set of extreme trans activists that some could possibly describe as fucking mentals. But I don't want this video to contribute to the disharmony and conflict in the world. I want it to bring peace and unity. I want this video to be the start of the healing process, where gamers and trans activists try and find some common ground and learn to live with each other in peace. So to start this process, buy this game, buy 2 copies of this game, buy your friends copies of this game, buy copies of this game and post them to gender critical trans activists. If you have a trans friend, buy them a Harry Potter book for Christmas. Every Christmas. There's enough to keep you going every year until 2030. Then I'll come up with a different plan. Buy copies of the Harry Potter books, discreetly tear out pages and leave them in cafes, bars and health food collectives. Leave a little trail of random Harry Potter pages on public transport, in waiting rooms and STD clinics. Get a Harry Potter tattoo. Fuck that. Get a JK Rowling tattoo on your left arse cheek and another JK Rowling tattoo on the right arse cheek, possibly with them kissing each other. It's not lesbian, they're both the same person. And not real, on your arse cheeks at least. Skip down the street, wearing a stupid Harry Potter scarf, a cape, carrying a broom and a copy of this game shouting, "I love Harry Potter." Not the pipsqueak actor that might be a hobbit, the real Harry Potter from the books. In fact, tell J.K. Rowling on Twitter that you love her. And if during your travels you encounter an angry and upset trans activist blubbing about Hogwarts Legacy, just be nice and compassionate to them and try and cheer them up by explaining that on the plus side, at least it's a great game, made $1 billion in the first month, and perhaps if they played it too, they might be less fucking miserable themselves. And if all this doesn't help make the world a better, more loving place, then buy a copy of Hogwarts Legacy, give it to a trans activist and tell them, this is the best video game ever made, and if you don't support it, you are actively contributing to violence against cisgendered gamers. Yeah, that should do it. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.